everybody, and welcome to another episode of Career Diaries by Elemed, the podcast dedicated to talking about careers in the MedTech industry. And today I'm really excited to have Mr. IVD himself, the man who needs no introduction, but I will give him one anyway, Steve Lee. Welcome.
Thank you. That's really kind of you. That's really kind of you. I do love working in IVD regulation.
How long have you been working in IVD, Steve?
Oh, gosh. It depends on how you count it, including using IVDs as well as regulating them. Then it's way over 30 years.
So I think I was right in calling you Mr. IVD.
There's plenty of us. There's plenty of us around.
So for those of our listeners who don't actually know who you are, maybe you could just say a couple of words as to sort of like who you are and what you do.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Steve Lee. I work for ABHI, which is the Association of British Health Tech Industries, the trade association for health tech, medical devices, IVDs, and digital. I do that 3 days a week, and 2 days a week I've got my own business. I've been doing this for 2 years now, almost exactly 2 years. Before that, I was 24 years with MHRA, the UK Competent Authority, including some time at the working for the I was chair of the IVD working group in Brussels, which was great fun and hard work. And before that, I've done some clinical and some manufacturing, and some work in hospitals as well.
So a very well-established career then in IVDs, both sort of regulator side, industry association side, and manufacturer side. Maybe we could just start by exploring your career journey and where it all started. How did you get into IVDs in the first place?
So I mean, I've always been a bit of a scientist geek. I've always enjoyed the science. I think ever since, most of us have had some kind of chemistry set or microscope set for Christmases. So that kind of always started me off. And then I guess kind of seeing it like the really personal side for me is seeing family members who've been ill and been helped by the healthcare system, and it's made me think, actually, I want to do some of that. I want to help people as well, because the health system has helped my family and helped my friends. So I want to do that, and so that's really what got me started. And then when I left university back in 1989, I went into what was then medical laboratory scientific officer or biomedical science, working in hospitals in the northeast and then down in London. From there I got to here.
So you sort of went in more on the sort of laboratory side, you said.
Yeah. We're working at a bench, working in bacteriology. So all those samples that go to the doctor, I've seen them and handled them on the bench. Whatever sample you can think of, I've been walking around in it and putting it on agar plates and looking down microscopes.
Any standout samples that you want to share with us?
No, I'm not going, because some people might be eating their dinner. So, but
worst imaginable, probably then.
Exactly. Yes.
All in
but, I mean, it's always good because you can find stuff. And I was doing bacteriology mostly, so you can find what was causing the infectious disease, or even if you don't find anything, at least you've eliminated the potential cause. So every day, we were processing hundreds and hundreds, sometimes thousands of samples, and finding out actually, that here's the cause of their problems, or we've eliminated something that might not be a problem anymore. So it was a really satisfying thing to do. Really enjoyed it.
And so what was your first move into sort of more the regulatory side of things?
So after I worked in hospitals, I worked in manufacturing. I was company microbiologist for a couple of companies, and they were products which were initially medicines regulated and then moved over to medical device regulation. So I kind of saw that change in regulatory status and started to think about what does that mean and how does that work. And then I saw a job for medical devices agency back in the day, and thought that's a way to kind of really get to know more about regulations and find out what's going on. So I applied for that and got it, and then stayed in what was the medical devices agency, and then MHRA, the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, for over 20 years because I loved it so much.
So there's loads that I want to dig into there, but something that sprung to mind that I wanted to ask you was, when you made this move to agency side, more in the regulatory role, how valuable was it to have had that real lab experience, you know, digging around in the samples yourself, and the industry experience before actually going onto the regulatory side?
For me, it was invaluable. I mean, I've worked with people who've kind of gone into regulatory straight from university, and they're really, really bright young things, and they're learning on the job, and they're fantastic. And I'm not going to knock that as a career journey. But for me, having that background in industry, understanding a little bit about the industry side, understanding a little about the user side, particularly that kind of, you know, what I was talking about, helping people and understanding what it means for their device to be performing properly. Even if they don't see it, you know, nobody sees the agar plate in the hospital, but that's got to, you know, that test has got to be the right test and perform for that patient so that they get the right result. And that understanding is really, really helpful. One of the first things I did working for Medical Devices Agency was go and meet Professor Ken Taylor at where was it? I think it might be in Hammersmith Hospital, do a heart valve replacement. And I was in the operating theatre with this open, the guy with his on the slab with his chest open and his leg cut up to get an artery to do a CABG, and also kind of seeing buckets of ice being poured into this man's chest so that he could slow the heart rate down, so that Ken Taylor could do this very delicate sewing of this heart valve into this man's heart. And you know, seeing that clinical aspect is really inspiring. It really helps me to understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. So having worked at the bench and having experienced things like that heart valve replacement and many other clinical activities while I was at MDA and MHRA, a great grounding and a great inspiration for why we all do what we do.
And it's so interesting to watch this regulatory field evolve, because when I first started recruiting in it, sort of like 10 years ago, so now I'm showing my age, feel like a veteran myself in the field, but at that time, you know, I remember I would look at, you know, people's CVs, and it would not be like a linear trajectory from like a junior regulatory role to a senior regulatory role. You know, at that time I would really see a lot of people coming from all different areas into regulatory, from having all different backgrounds, you know, within industry, but, you know, R&D. I've seen people go, you know, from marketing into post-market surveillance, you know, so I've seen lots of different avenues of how you can get into regulatory. Nowadays it is, you know, more mature, I would say, as a career path, and can literally come out of uni and go straight into a regulatory role and have a very fruitful career all the way up. But having that additional background from being able to see it from a different perspective, it does add value. I've seen, you know, to be able
I think so, Eleanor. And by the way, 10 years, you're still a baby. You're still a baby. But you're catching up. You're catching up.
I'm catching up. I've got a few grey hairs.
But yeah, I think you're right. I think that is the right word, perspective. You get a different perspective on the job. If you just go into an office and work in regulatory affairs, doing submissions to regulatory authorities, you know, I think it's more difficult to find that inspiration for your work. It's there, obviously it's there, and you know it, but I think it's much more tangible if you've been on the receiving side of it, if you've been using those products and involved in kind of how that manufacturing process works as well.
So let's just fast forward to sort of your next job. So you went into the Medical Device Agency, now MHRA, and you were there for like 24 years. So I'm really interested in retention. It's something that we're working with a lot of our clients on. You know, like it's all well and good being able to hire good people, but if you can't keep them, then basically you've got a problem. 24 years, you know, in one place is a decent amount of time. So what was their secret to keeping you there that long?
Well, it wasn't the pay. It definitely wasn't the pay. We would always say, you know, you don't go and work in public sector, you don't go and work in government because you want to make money. It's not about making lots of money. Now, having said that, you know, there's a reasonable pension, and there are benefits. I'm not going to knock that. And you know, it's not as much as you get paid in industry, but it's a living wage. Why did I stay there for 24 years? I think part of it was every day was a school day. I was always learning something new, and doing different jobs within that, and learning about different products, like different ways of working, different skills, but also it's being surrounded by talent. Is really important. You know, how do I develop and progress as a person if I can't help other people develop and progress, if we can't help each other? And if when you're surrounded by the best, I think that inspires you to be your best self as well. So I always love being surrounded by talent, and working with people who can really inspire me.
So is there anyone sort of like that's really stood out for you in your careers, either somebody that you've looked up to, or somebody that you've helped, that when you reflect back, it's really, you know, stood out for you?
I mean, on the leadership side, I would say, obviously Graham Tunbridge was a fantastic leader. He's a fantastic boss. Prior to Graham was John Wilkinson.
Yeah.
And I'm going to embarrass him now, but I consider John Wilkinson to be a really inspiring leader. There's not many of them about, but he was an inspiring leader because he made me think differently about my job. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why I stayed in. Once John joined, before he joined, I was probably kind of getting a bit fed up. But when he joined, it really kind of gave me a different perspective, a different reason. And he not only did he support me, but he allowed me to look at the job in a different way.
What did he do specifically that challenged you?
I think it was, yeah, he came back from a conference on rare diseases, you know, and said, you should go to a conference on rare diseases because it makes you think differently about why you're doing what you're doing. He talked about devices in the hands and bodies of citizens and needing to work as they should. And just things like that. He had a way of talking. He was very supportive of me in that application to be chair of the IVD working group, which really helped me. And you know, I probably people probably get bored about me saying it, but it's something that I really enjoyed doing, and it really allowed me to develop as a person, and allowed me to develop those skills to kind of bring groups together and try and get people to work together as teams. That was so he just gave me the space to do that.
So talk to me a little bit more about that role then, because that seems to be a role that really stands out for you.
The IVD working group.
Yeah. I
mean, I've been on the IVD working group for many years, under Pascal Maisonneuve and under Jean-Claude Ghislain, you know, the French chairs. And then when Jean-Claude stepped down, it was just, well, here's an opportunity. I could see there were others who could do the job equally as well, but many of them were from smaller competent authorities. So you know, MHRA's got, you know, had some resource to be able to do this. I thought, well, why not? And doing it. And for me, this is really important. I wasn't prepared for the job. I didn't know how to do it when I first went into it. I really struggled and probably made a few mistakes. But I was surrounded by people who would support me, surrounded by people who would help me. So it was possible to make some mistakes. I mean, not to screw it up completely, but to make some mistakes and develop into it. And you know, if people come away, you know, go into a job that's really challenging and feel that imposter syndrome, I think that's normal. That's okay. Just so long as you know that you can develop into that job and you can work with others to be highly performing at the end of it. I'm not saying I was a highly performing chair, but you know, it was an area where where anybody could be highly performing because of the kind of support and encouragement and the learning that you could do on the job.
What were some of the sort of like big takeaways or key skills that you developed in that role?
So in that group, you're chairing kind of, what was it, 28 different member states. Some of them, you know, they just didn't engage with that group, so they weren't there. So it wasn't 28 people in the room. Some people came along and engaged really well and were really active. And it's kind of like, actually, yeah, you know, you need to give other people a chance to speak as well, which was great. You know, they understood that. Getting those other people to speak, you know, where English isn't their foreign language, where they may not be an IVD specialist, where they may have a boss who you know, is kind of quite finds it quite important that they only say what's the company line, but getting those people to contribute, that was really hard. And that wasn't about what happened in the meeting when we were chairing it. That's about all the things that happen in the sidelines, and all the things that happen between meetings, happen when you start the meeting. And I watched one guy very early on in that meeting, and he just went around and he just shook everybody's hand and said hello. And I thought, wow, that's really powerful. And I tried doing that. I thought, actually, that now I've spoken to everybody in the room. They've all spoken to me. Now it's going to be easy for them to speak up when they want to speak up. And I know who they are. I can focus on them, and I can ask them questions without them feeling like they're being picked on. So just simple things like that about relating to individuals in the group are really, really helpful. Rather than just turning up and looking at Facebook or whatever you look at in the back of a meeting and not really engaging. I really thought that kind of helping people to be proactive, giving them the space to speak and contribute. That
human connection ultimately is what it all comes down to, isn't it? At the end, like that's absolutely critical. So, okay, I'm going to just spiral to another topic, because anyone that's looked at your LinkedIn profile, or might have looked at your LinkedIn profile now, is going to see a really interesting role there, completely non-related, it seems, to IVDs and working in regulatory affairs. But you were on the school governing team. So, like, it looks like it was at the same time when you were in the MHRA. So tell me more about that. How did that come along?
Oh wow. Yeah, no, I'm really proud of what I did there. I'm really pleased about that. It's in some ways it's a shame I don't have the time to do it anymore. But anybody who's worked in a school or in a school governing body, I think will feel the same. I had this kind of, I suppose, the kind of ambition, which is probably a little bit pompous, a little bit arrogant, but I wanted to have influence locally, nationally, and internationally. I wanted to use my skills and for positive, for positive effect. And I was doing the IVD working groups. I thought, well, that's international. I was doing MHRA and working with a team of about 10 people, 9 or 10 people, doing high profile incident work. And I thought, I know what, let's do something local as well. So I joined the school governing body, and it's an inner city school. I don't know, Eleanor, do you know Deptford? It's a lovely place. It's very different now to what it was 20 years ago. 20 years ago, it was really, really high rate of immigration. The school itself had about 30% of the pupils had special needs, and it was a big school. When I started, it was 550 pupils. Yeah. When I left, it was nearly 700 pupils. So it was a big and growing school of people with lots of special needs. Because of the immigration, the mobility was very high. Yeah. So it meant that it was really difficult for teachers to work with a pupil from going in at early key stage right through to leaving the school. They didn't have that whole school journey. Everybody had part school journey because they came in at different times of the year. So it meant that it was really difficult to get those grades, to get that Ofsted mark. And it was really difficult also to kind of for the school to meet some of those behavioural needs that may be outside of Ofsted, but actually really, really important. So I joined that and was doing that for a few years, starting to get really, really fed up with it. Again, there's a bit of a theme here. I was starting to get really, really fed up with it. And then the Ofsted inspectors came along, and I said I would support the then chair through the Ofsted inspection, because that's what he wanted. And then halfway through the Ofsted inspection, through the interview, it was me and him and the Ofsted inspector, and he walked out. And I've never seen him since. I was like, no. Wow, what do I do now? So eventually took on the chair role. And that Ofsted inspection, you won't be surprised to hear, was satisfactory. It was okay. Yeah. We weren't in special measures, but we weren't anything brilliant. And then I took on the chair role. I immediately put in my exit plan. I said no more than 4 years for any one chair, possibly just 2. At 2 years, there wasn't anybody to take over. At 4 years, there was somebody to take over. As soon as I handed in my resignation, we got another call for an Ofsted inspection. So we did that, and we got Ofsted good. So we went from Ofsted satisfactory to Ofsted good while I was doing my 4 years of a chair. And I thought that was really something that I helped the school do that. The school did that themselves. It wasn't me. The school did that themselves, but I was a little part of helping them to do that, and used some of my skills to help them do that. And I'm really, really proud of that. So thank you for asking me, Alan. I really appreciate that.
And I'm a big believer in sort of like, you get learnings in all different areas of your life, and you can apply them to all different areas of your life as well. And I'm just curious, sort of like, so you've got this role going on at the MHRA, but you're also doing this role at chair of the governors at the school and sort of helping them move forwards. What skills and experiences did you learn that you could apply in either direction? So what did you learn in the role when you were working with the school that you could apply in your role at MHRA, or vice versa?
So everybody brings something to the party. And that's not everybody can, everybody should, but everybody will. Everybody will bring something to the party, whether they bring something which is a real contribution that helps you move along, or they've got a particular need that needs to be addressed. Everybody brings something, and that there's no real passengers. Some people come along and they don't really contribute, they don't really engage. I was talking about that with the IVD group, but actually they've got needs. And it's possible to at least understand everybody's needs, even if you can't address them. And if some of those needs are to you know, in the school, a lot of the kind of parent governors, if they weren't, you know, it wasn't a posh school, so it wasn't full of kind of posh working mums and dads. It was perhaps people who had a bit more time on their hands and didn't have a job. By being on the school board, they were able to kind of build up skills and experience that they could put on their CV. That, for me, that was really important to help them do that, even if it meant that they weren't kind of 100% on the job. It meant that they were learning, like I learned as a chair of the IVD group. They were learning as part of their journey, and you know, a couple of them went on to get jobs as a direct result of being on the board of governors, and that's great, isn't it? You know, you're helping people develop in their careers, even if they bring needs rather than contributions. So everybody brings something to the party.
So if you sort of reflect back on your career, what else has been a standout moment for you?
I would say it's not really my achievement. It's the achievement of somebody called Janine Jameson.
Oh,
Janine, you know Janine.
Yeah.
Everybody knows Janine. Hi, Janine.
Hi, Janine. I'm sure she's listening, actually.
So Janine is fantastic. She's brilliant, and she's been a real inspiration to me. And she put me forward twice for a top award. Didn't get it the first time, but got it the second time. And that was a really standout moment. Not because I thought, oh wow, I'm award-winning now. Because actually, what Janine did was she went around a whole load of people and said, "Can you contribute something that will help Steve with this award?" And they did. I was like, wow, I'm really grateful to all those people who helped with that, particularly Janine, because she wouldn't rest until she got it, and then she got it for me, and that was fantastic. So that was a standout moment, just seeing how many people were prepared to support me to do that. It's humbling. It's fantastic. It was great.
And it also shows, like, the thing I really love about this industry is that it's a small one because everyone knows each other, right? But people are very supportive of each other's growth, I find.
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, even like on this podcast today, you know, you're just, you know, dropping names here and there of all these people that have helped you in your career. And I'm sure, you know what, I know for a fact, I've spoken to people that reference you all the time, you know, and I think it's really positive to be in an industry where people are really just so engaged with each other and trying to help each other. It's genuinely an industry that is all about purpose, all about that bigger purpose of just helping people.
Yeah.
And it's something that you've spoken to since the very beginning. So I wanted to bring it to the hot thing right now, the IVDR, because we haven't spoken about the IVDR, and I can't have Steve Lee on my podcast and not talk about IVDR, right? So let's just start with just generally, what are your thoughts about it?
So we started talking about IVDR way back when. When we looked at kind of the IMDRF kind of classification for IVDs, the classification principles, and we're saying, well, actually, this could work for IVDs, you know, and that's kind of now when was that? That would have been 2012, 2010. So many years ago, so started seeing that, and then seeing that common position come through, saying actually, yeah, all of this, the need for clinical evidence, the classification system, the extra scrutiny, all of this will work. You know, these are concepts which are needed. Some of them are demanding. We knew it was going to change I knew it was going to change the industry, and for the better. It was going to make sure that all these products could be fully trusted. You know, when I was listening to people in pathology labs in hospitals saying, well, we've got to do all this extra validation because we don't trust what the manufacturer says on the label. So, well, that's not a good situation, is it? You know, okay, you don't have to trust it implicitly, but you don't have to go through a full validation every time, every single individual laboratory doing a full validation every time. And that's something that still happens. And we really need to kind of move on from that and have a better collaborative relationship between the manufacturer and the user. And the concepts in IVDR that address that are all there. They will do that. IVDR will do that eventually. It's been so long in the making, so long. So, you know, we're here kind of 10, 12 years later, and it's still, you know, there's still a long way to go. You know, I think kind of, you know, the regulatory framework from start to being completely obsolete, you know, it's about 20, 30 years. It's really slow moving. So we've really got to kind of think about that next time around. But, you know, the implementation now, it's really hitting some stumbling blocks. And you know, it's kind of, well, I didn't foresee that. I assumed that we'd write the regulations. They would all go together, and it all and you know, the people like Graham and others who really negotiated those regulations fantastically well. But then I don't think any of us thought, well, what's the roadmap for implementation? And I think that was the problem, is there wasn't a roadmap for implementation. If you look at the health technology assessment regulations, they did it in 2 stages. The first stage was get the infrastructure in place, get the legislation there, get the guidance there, get the processes there, and then you've got to get that done within a certain time. And that was all down to the commission. And then after that, it's down to manufacturers to say, you've now got all the infrastructure, go ahead and meet that. And I think that was a much better model for regulations than we saw for either MDR or IVDR. And it's a model that I'm really, in as much as I'm able from this position to say, well, actually, can we do that in the UK? Can we have a roadmap for infrastructure, a roadmap for implementation? And that's something that I bang on about all the time in making sure we can all see where we're going. We can all see the direction of travel, so we know what's going to happen. Even if that roadmap changes, even if that roadmap flexes, we just need to see that roadmap for implementation. And in hindsight, I think that's what we could have or should have done for MDR and in particular for IVDR, because the changes for IVDs are so great.
How do you think the IVDR, there's been a lot of talk from the MDR perspective that, you know, it's going to have a big impact on the smaller manufacturers, companies deciding whether or not to go to Europe first or to the US, and there are some that are choosing to go to the US instead of Europe because of, you know, the increased burden, etc., etc. Like, from the IVD perspective, what do you think has or will be the impact of IVDR on IVD manufacturers?
So when I looked at the survey that MedTech Europe did last year and looked at that, there was that graphic that said if everything worked really well, you'd lose about 20% of your products. If you don't pull your socks up, and this is to the commission, and I'm paraphrasing, MedTech Europe would never say things like this. Oliver's too diplomatic to say anything like this, but I can say it frankly. If the commission don't pull their socks up, they could lose 70% of IVDs from the EU market. I mean, that was an amazing wake-up call, and I feel that kind of messaging directly led to the extra transition period that would give manufacturers some breathing space. I'm going to pause there because I need to blow my nose. I'm going to switch my video on my sound off.
So we've got Steve here who's suffering from we don't know what it is. It's probably just the man flu. And he's to excuse himself at the beginning to say, you know, I might have to sneeze or something on this podcast. So I also want to give you, Steve, kudos for actually showing up today to record. So are you hanging in there? You're managing though?
I'm good. I just didn't you didn't need to see that on camera.
So, okay, so let's talk about skills, right? Because we spoke a little bit about sort of careers in IVD and careers in regulatory affairs. If you were to fast forward looking at the industry and where it's going, in your expert opinion, what do you think are going to be some of the most in-demand skills related to the IVD field in the next 10 years?
I think it depends on which way we go. Is it are we looking for IVD regulatory to be just done by IVD experts? Mm. Yeah, who've grown up with IVDs and have only done IVDs, or are we looking to broaden it out and say, actually, a lot of the IVD regulatory, could that be done by people with medical device regulatory if they upskill? Yeah. They might not see it as upskilling. I see it as upskilling, because there are some really special things that you need to understand from an IVD perspective. I think if you go down the road of only IVD people can do IVDs, I think that's not going to help it. That will help us, but it's not going to go far enough. I think we need to kind of accept that people can come in from the medical device side, from other regulated industries, and they can start to understand, actually, the IVDs are different. There's a reason why they're different, and there's a consequence to that difference. You know, things like the classification, things like performance evaluation, things like the fact that IVDs are remote from the patient. So the development is remote from the patient, the use is remote from the patient, and the benefit is remote from the patient. So you could do a clinical study, taking samples from patients in one country, send the results to a lab in another country, and then have them analysed and interpreted by a third country. So how does regulatory work for that? And how do you protect the people in that study to make sure that they're not being harmed and their samples are being used in the right way? You know, it's not just, oh, I've given a blood sample or a urine sample to a lab. Actually, that sample has a meaning, and there's an ownership of it, and a right to make sure that sample is used in the right way. There's a whole ethical consideration, which is very, very different to a medical device. You know, the technologies are different, the way in which they're used are different, the performance evaluation is different, and the classification is different. So it's really important to be able to get an understanding of that when you're trying to implement a new regulation in a company. You know, again, we're not just talking about regulatory affairs submissions. We're talking about actually implementing a regulatory system within you know, either a very small or a very large organisation. And I think having an understanding of that is more than an understanding of MDR. It's an understanding of basic device regulation, plus those things about IVDs, which are very specific.
Mm. There's definitely a skills shortage, and the question is, where are these people going to come from? And there's different schools of thought, as you've said. So there's the school of thought of, if you can get a good regulatory person with medical devices, they are quite close in the regulations, right? And so therefore you can get somebody from regulatory medical devices and train them on the IVDR and how IVDs work, and they can sort of use those skills in a new context. Or alternatively, the other option would be that you bring somebody similar to what regulatory looks like 10 years ago or 15, 20 years ago, which was, because it's not as mature in IVDs, you look at people from other areas within IVD that have the natural inclination, demonstrate some of the skills that you need in order to be an effective regulatory professional, let's say, and you move them into a regulatory role. So potentially, you know, you look at people within R&D, can look at people within quality and teach them about the regulation, but then they'll have the technical knowledge of how IVDs work, you know, and of the IVD industry. Do you think that one strategy is more effective than the other?
This isn't a culture war between IVDR and MDR. This isn't about, would we prefer this one or would we prefer that one? I think there's a huge demand for people who are capable and competent in IVD regulation, and even if they don't come into it knowing exactly, and again, this is a theme, even if they don't come into it knowing everything, it's provided they've got a development plan and can learn on the job, and there's a training plan to support them, and people have the space to make mistakes, you know, and do that safely, then I think really it's not one or the other. And I would hate to think that we were in some kind of culture war. That's hiding to nothing. We need skilled people. What I think I would warn against is people coming into IVD space thinking it's just like any other regulatory space.
Yeah,
it's nothing special. You know, well, maybe it's nothing special, but it's different and it's unique, and because of that, it's special. And that's why we do need some people within the industry, within the regulatory industry, who understand IVDs and understand the special nature of IVDs.
Mm-hmm. So if you're talking to someone who's at the start of their career right now, and they're saying to you, Steve, I'm interested in pursuing a career in regulatory potentially, what advice do you have for me? What would you say to them?
Keep doing it. It's a really interesting career. It's something that you will get a lot out of. So yeah, I went to the Top Careers Fair the other day and talked to people who are kind of just coming out of university or just starting on, and there's some real enthusiasm for regulatory, which I was surprised at, and a real enthusiasm for devices and IVD regulatory, which is fantastic to hear. So, you know, it's build on that enthusiasm. Make every day a school day. Make sure you're surrounded by talent. You know, try and learn things every day. Try and learn about the new products and new technologies and the new regulations, and also make sure that you're learning from your peers and your leaders, and you're teaching them as well. You're helping them to develop. You know, you don't have to be didactic about it. You don't have to be sitting down and teaching people a lesson, but you can learn through doing and learn through sharing, learn through collaboration.
Never stop learning, essentially, is the theme.
Exactly.
So one final question for you, Steve. What is the legacy that you want to leave on the world?
Oh, I don't know.
Big one.
Yeah, but I'm not that old, you know. I've still got time. Doesn't sound like it, but I've still got time to make an impact. You know, I'm not sure I've made an impact yet, but I you know, I've got a few years left before I start picking up my state pension, and looking back on my career, and you know, when I do that and I start thinking about what have I achieved, I would like to think that it's kind of just not just me moving things forward, but me collaborating and working with others, that we've all moved things forward, so that, you know, it doesn't have to be a really well-defined team. I think it just has to be collaborations, you know, and constantly trying to work with others, constantly, like you do, Elena. You do this really, really well. You're always looking out to network. You're always looking out, and you're not doing it just, I mean, your business is growing. It's fantastic to see your business growing. But I think that's not your only driver. I think one of your drivers is to make sure everybody moves along together, everybody comes along, everybody brings something to the party, you know, and it's that kind of thing that your approach is something I aspire to, and I think everybody should aspire to. Is trying to bring the whole community along together.
Thank you, Steve. I really appreciate the really kind words. Truly, like, it really does mean a lot. And it's why we do this podcast, you know, like I love to be able to give people a platform to share their story. And I think, you know, just listening to your story and where you've come from, it's so inspiring to sort of see what you've learned. And I think you can learn from everyone all the time and develop your own style. And you know, I truly believe that there's power in networks and power in community and power in collaboration. And you've displayed it beautifully talking about your career today, and, you know, all the people whose lives you've touched and all the people who have touched your life and your career on your journey. So look, thank you so much for being a guest on my podcast. It wasn't that scary.
Really appreciate it. Thank you for spending the time to talk with me.
Thank you. And to everybody who's listened to this episode, don't forget to comment, like, connect with Steve, and listen in for the next episode of Career Diaries by Elemed. Thanks, and see you soon. Bye.
Cheerio.